Hello, I'm Lubisich.
And I'm Eloy, storyteller,
Historian. We're going to continue introducing the three visions of society. We started the course with the traditional vision, and now we're moving on to the liberal vision of society. If we're thinking again about those definitions, and my love of walking you through a table,
Yes.
In this vision of society, the people who hold power have shifted. We talked about change a lot with the traditional vision. Now the change is power is being held by the middle class. You have an idea of equality that's developed, although it's civil equality. It's not a full-blown social equality. This is something that is a progression as we work through these visions. There is a constitution that's put in place, the liberal constitution. And while today there's not a good example of a liberal constitution that's in use, you can think of it roughly as being the American Constitution stripped of its amendments. So that original document before people began to actually think about its implications.
Okay, so here what we're looking at, if you remember in the traditional society, as we saw in the traditional society, is that we organize the world in kind of a body structure. So when you look at the liberal society, the power that was dominated by the traditional structure in the head is now being distributed throughout the body. So you're having more people with voices, more people with input, and they are gathering their power in a very different place than what we saw in the traditional society. It's not so natural. They've come to power because of their own work or their own endeavors, which the society is allowing them to participate in a different way.
And so when we talk about where society's focus is, in the liberal vision, it's with the individual. So it's that pushing out of the head of the monarch into these other areas, and it's through that idea of individual effort, individual achievement, and individual capacity, what people are able to do.
And also the idea of liberty. These people are now going to ask for liberties. Liberties were the actions that were allowable to the traditional elite. And now this ability to have their own endeavors are going to be expressed that we want our liberties also. And that's why a liberal constitution is important, because at its fundamental base, the traditional society is now losing its power or its divine right to rule and is being shifted over to a piece of paper that now everybody can read. And what the Constitution should truly be expressing is how all people now have certain liberties and rights to be able to fulfill their own individual desires.
And hopefully living in the society that we do, that change does make sense. Trusting a piece of paper doesn't seem foreign to you. It actually seems really rational and reasonable to you, that you would have a contract and you would write out what your rights are. And so when we look at change in the liberal vision of society, we're talking about change that's done reasonably and rationally. It is the legacy of the scientific revolution and of Enlightenment thought. So if we think about these two visions next to each other, again, what we really want you to track is the change that's taking place. And so looking at the shift from kings and nobles to the middle class, looking at the emerging ideas of equality, looking at the development of a constitution, these are all changes that you need to be able to follow chronologically, but they're really complex in terms of how those interactions play out.
And why storytellers like to tell really simple stories is that if you look at the tables here, it's hard to explain how you can have a traditional vision and a liberal vision living in the same time. So having the idea or introducing the idea or concept of a constitutional monarchy, well, how does that work? These are all the kind of things we like to do, this one vision and another vision, because that's an easy shift. But this takes a long time to be able to manifest itself within the society.
And the point that they coexist is important. And in part, that's the point of the picture that you're seeing on this slide. When we talked about what was driving change in the traditional vision of society, we asked you to think about trade and to keep your attention on that particular interaction. And so here, mercantilism is going to be an idea that is going to drive the ideologies of trade and interactions, and that is going to be a fundamental base in terms of the changes that are occurring. I thought for sure you'd have something to say.
I'm waiting for you to introduce the picture.
The picture. So it's a picture that I love in particular because of the event that it captures. And here you have the British East India Company administrators arriving in India, and they are meeting with Sultan Tipu, who is greeting them and recognizing the role that they have attained in trade, is offering 2 of his children to them, almost as a tribute, that the children are going to be raised by the company, in the company, and that there is going to be a bond made between his dynastic rule and what the company represents.
And this is where the complication happens. And it's really a hard story to be able to tell, because here we have both visions being simultaneously fulfilled. They're both traditional societies. The English are dominated and ruled by a king. The traditional society that they're entering is structured right in front of them. What the king of the traditional society thinks he's doing here is an equal exchange, between his rule and his traditional rule and the traditional rule of the English that are coming in. But the only way that exchange would be truly equal is if the King of England was here. The King of England, by not being there, what the traditional society here thinks or understands as an equal exchange is really he's handing over his children to the arms of the other traditional society, who have been granted the liberties to make this contract.
So when we talk about the British East India Company, they function under a royal charter. They have been given authority by the king. But this interaction is not quite read the same way by both sides. And yet, in some ways, it is, and we'll get to that. So again, coming back to that comparison and thinking about the changes that are taking place, keep in mind that we're not moving from one vision that is then replaced by another. There is a lot of overlap, there are a lot of complications, there are a lot of interactions that are going to be shaping and defining the way that this actually looks in history. So, as we work through this last unit, we again are asking you to think about the systems and structures, the interactions, what's happening politically, how are social hierarchies changing, what's occurring in the world of trade, and who's in power. And here is when we come back to how Sultan Tipu feels about this interaction with the British. And this is a little music box. It's kept at the British Museum in London. And if you were ever to see it actually used, it winds up and the tiger mauls the company man as the company man screams in pain. And so even though we have this painting by a British painter of this wonderful interaction of sort of economic exchange, you also have the recognition of the changes that are taking place in Tipu's tiger.
And this is also what the traditional society thinks they're always in control in. Often what is happening is that the English realize that things are changing dramatically, but the traditional society does not think so. This tiger may be able to go after a company man or a company on a particular deal, but it's not going to dismantle the structure of England and their traditional society. The one society that is going to usually suffer are the non-European traditional societies that are alienated from those dramatic changes.
And we'll continue to look at that as we move forward.